All right, everyone. Good evening. It's so excited to have everybody here. My name is Paige Fernandez. I am the policing policy advocate at ACLU National. I use she, her pronouns, and I will be moderating this discussion with all of these amazing people on this panel today. I want to welcome all of you to our virtual town hall about public safety transformation. Today, we're really going to go in depth on what took place in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, where the City Council recently passed one of the most powerful and progressive resolutions around public safety in the country. A big thank you to our co-hosts for the event, Local Progress, a national network of local elected officials advancing a racial and economic justice agenda through all levels of local government, the ACLU National and the ACLU of Minnesota, Barbershop and Black Congregations Cooperative, a coalition of Black barbers, beauticians, and owners in Minnesota who are advancing a more just Minnesota for their communities. Just a few accessibility notes. We have amazing ASL interpreters with us today and a captioner as well. If you have any other needs that we have not met, please feel free to message us and we will try to meet those needs. And now just some context setting before we kind of dive into the panel talk. In April of this year, a Brooklyn Center police officer shot and killed Dante Wright during a traffic stop. This killing occurred during the trial of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd, which was taking place just miles away. In the days that followed, there was an outpouring of pain and grief and anger and rage as people in Brooklyn Center created a vigil for Dante and protested the police department. These protesters were met with more police brutality and violence as police deployed tear gas and other crowd control weapons against the protesters. In the wake of all of this, Brooklyn Center came together to do something remarkable. Its city council passed the Dante Wright and Kobe DeMcKeisler Community Safety Act to transform how the city pursues a vision of keeping its residents safe. So today, we're so excited and honored to be joined by three of the leaders from that effort to tell the story of how they passed this resolution and what it stands to accomplish. We hope you'll gain an understanding not just of what they passed, but how they passed it and how they plan to implement this vision of community safety. We really hope you'll take these lessons back to your community. So let's dive right in. I'll briefly introduce our speakers today and then turn it over to them for opening remarks. First, we have Mayor Mike Elliott, who is the mayor of Brooklyn Center and authored the resolution that passed City Council. We have Munir Mohammed, who is a policy associate at the ACLU of Minnesota, and Brian Fullman, who is the lead organizer with the Barbershop and Black Congregation Cooperative. Thank you all so much for being here. It is an absolute honor. And I'm going to toss it right to Mayor Mike for some opening remarks about what we accomplished in Brooklyn Center.
All right, well, thank you, Paige. So just to get us started just to talk about this resolution and what it means for our community and why it's important. Paige talked about what happened just immediately following the killing of Dante Wright. Our community came together and the community made it very clear that it was time for us to move in a new transformative direction when it comes to public safety in Brooklyn Center. We held obviously several listening sessions in the community, and the result was this resolution that establishes for us a new North Star and a new North Star that keeps all members of our community safe, a new approach that ensures that our community gets the help they need, an approach that focuses our armed police officers on serious issues, but it's also an approach that addresses racial justice in a real way, and it's an approach that prevents the loss of more life in the future. So this resolution really puts us firmly towards creating this new vision for our community and for our city. It commits us to working together as one community and turns our eyes towards a more just public safety system that focuses on the health of our community and focuses our resources where they're needed, where they're most needed.
Thank you, Mayor Mike. Manira, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. And I think I'll just talk about why I'm really excited about this resolution. I think what's unique about it is that it really does, it's not just a reactionary, impulsive move to a police killing, one of many police killings we've seen over the years, but it provides a roadmap that comprehensively looks at what exactly is going wrong with these interactions between police and the community, and what are the deep systemic problems within city government itself, and how do we start to rebuild that and remodel that in a way that allows for community co-creation and having a voice, especially for the citizens and residents of Brooklyn Center. And then also just moving towards a more evidence-based, healthier approach that explores alternative models. So I'm really excited that we could do that in Brooklyn Center, and I hope we can, transfer that to the rest of the country.
Thanks so much, Manira. And Brian.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, just like my colleague, Mr. Mayor, and what Manira just said, I just think that is exactly right. I do want to mention that one of the significant and high level of importance about passing this resolution is more about us having the audacity to imagine public safety in a new way, that public safety is not just one option. Brooklyn Center, it almost reminds me of like the pawn on the chessboard. And if you march that pawn all the way down successfully on the other end of the chessboard, it becomes the queen. So Brooklyn Center, being a smaller city in the state of Minnesota, is now the model of what it is to have something comprehensive, something that's transparent, and something that actually has the community at the core of it. So I'm just very excited about the impact, about the opportunity, and just the sheer will to want to have something that actually preserves the respect and the dignity of the community.
Absolutely. This is really bold. I love that idea of like having the audacity to pass something so bold and so radical and transformative. I'm going to toss it over to Manira now to talk a little bit about the actual policy and break it down for us. So what was in the resolution and why is it so important?
Sure, I would love to do that. Yes, and you'll be able to see some slides soon that give some kind of visual graphic for people to follow along with. But I think what I'd like to start off by saying is that this really is a framework and a roadmap for the city's new approach to public safety and community health. Are you on the slides page? I don't know if people can see you. Lovely. All right, so really it is kind of a laundry list of all the reforms that people have been testing around the country that are evidence-based, that people have really been kind of proponents of. So the whole idea is to first really get at the base of like how these departments are speaking to one another, and what is the most effective way to structure the city government in a way that delivers justice to ordinary people. So the biggest provision within the resolution is to create this new Department of Community Safety and Violence Prevention that again has public health as its goal rather than simply policing or punishing for offenses. So what we have is a much more comprehensive and integrated model, and everything will be under this new Community Safety and Violence Prevention Department. So we have traffic enforcement, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and that would be a new unarmed civilian department. We have just the traditional police department, we have the fire department, and we also have a new department that was added in, which is the community response department. And if you go to the next slide, we can get into those newer ones that were added. So as you can see, the existing ones are police and fire. And in this new all-encompassing department, we also have traffic enforcement, which is going to be a civilian traffic unit. There's been a lot of journals, a lot of studies across the country. We even had Dr. Blair Woods, I think Jordan, if I'm not wrong, come and speak about why the most common interaction people have with police is during traffic enforcement and traffic stops, and that this can be really an unnecessary site of escalation and violence for people, as it was for Dante Wright. So having a civilian traffic enforcement for all non-moving vehicles, all non-moving traffic offenses, all non-felony, non-warrant ones. So really, we're talking about the super minor offenses, things like being pulled over for tinted windows or late registration tabs, things that really do not require someone with a gun to come to the situation. And again, just tailoring the right response for the right need. So we think traffic enforcement has been shown to be a site of escalation, and they really don't need to be. So having a civilian traffic enforcement, we're hoping, will just decrease the footprint of police in the community and provide people with much more equitable responses. And then there's the community response department. This is again focusing on the right response for the right need. So a lot of calls that the police deal with, as we know, are stuff that social workers usually would deal with, or medical health professionals. Things like mental health crises are a big part of this. So having some kind of community response that does not include armed police officers is incredibly vital here in Brooklyn Center and for cities across the country. So having the right response for the right need at that time, and having a trained medical, social worker, mental health professionals was really important. As you can see, this is just the public health approach to public safety, and we're really hoping this new department will deliver on that. If you go to the next slide. And just to get into that a bit more, so again, another goal of this resolution is not simply to create all these new departments, but also really to create the permanent infrastructure for co-creation and having some kind of community input from Brooklyn Center residents. So the Community Safety Department will also have a committee basically full of Brooklyn Center residents, kind of highlighting especially the ones who've had interactions with the police and therefore have that lived experience to serve on a committee like this. The committee would make recommendations to the City Council on how to change any kind of policy recommendations. They would also do things like review the police contracts and negotiations before they're finalized. And again, just creating that two-way street where we are not only forcing these new policies onto communities, but we also give them space to come and talk to the City Council and have their voice heard. Next slide, please. So there are a myriad of other provisions within the resolution as well. We have restrictions on use of force, and we also have citations and summons policies. And these are just to focus on general law enforcement policies and behavior that can be corrected pretty quickly. So the citations and summons policy we're hoping to roll out quite soon. And this would be just stopping the custodial arrest that police make for things that are, again, very low minor offenses, and simply just having a write-up ticket instead. And really, we're again hoping just to limit the footprint of police within the community and stop those situations from escalating in a manner that they really don't need to be. Having some common sense, evidence-based approaches and new policy guidelines for the police. Yeah, those are just kind of a quick overview of the resolution.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Manira. That was super helpful. Mayor Mike, since you authored this, this resolution, I wanted to open it up to you if you had anything you want to add or something that you're like super excited about in the resolution.
Well, absolutely. I'm excited about the whole entire resolution. We really wanted something that would be transformative, and what Manira just went through, we believe is transformative. We think it's a holistic approach to public safety. We're stepping back and we're saying, hey, what is it that we need? For when our community calls and they dial 911 or they call a number for help, what kind of help do we need to respond with? And up until this point, the only answer has been in Brooklyn Center, the only answer was somebody with a gun. So if somebody called because they're grandson, for instance, was having a hard, difficult time, due to the fact that maybe they were dealing with some mental health issues, or they're, autistic or on the autism spectrum, our only option, our only response was to send someone with a gun. And, with this resolution, we're stepping back and saying, what does it mean for everybody in our community to feel safe? And that's the question we're answering. And we're saying, look, we need a variety of different types of responses. We need more tools in our toolbox, so that when our community is in need, we can respond appropriately. So I'm excited about all aspects of this resolution. The fact that we get to put together this citation and summons policy that's going to decrease arrests in our community. When the police arrest someone, it usually take on average 10 hours to process that one arrest. And all departments across the country pay a lot of money in overtime to police officers, and that's taxpayer dollars. It disrupts communities, it disrupts families. Mothers and fathers can't be home to take care of their children. And it's often for these low-level offenses, they lose out on employment, they might lose their job and lose their housing. There's a rippling effect. And a lot of these arrests are for really low-level things that people shouldn't be arrested for. So I'm really excited that we'll be implementing that particular policy very soon. It's going to have a great impact on our community. I'm excited about our mental health response unit. I'm excited about the civilian traffic response unit as well. And I'm actually really excited about our community response department, which really is going to be a department where we have a variety of new innovative approaches that aren't listed yet in the resolution, that are going to be community-based, the community is going to come up with, and we're going to try those new approaches in that department. We're going to be focusing our overall efforts on reducing harm within the community and improving health, improving life outcomes. So I'm super excited.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I'm going to kind of move us along in the conversation and go to this point of like how we got this done. How did this happen? How did this pass? And Brian, I was actually hoping you could talk a little bit about what it looked like on the ground in the days leading up to the passage of the resolution and what was happening over the course of the month between Dante Wright's killing and the resolution being passed.
Well, of course, there was a lot of disparity. There was a lot of pain, just a lot of frustration. When you're dealing with these kind of atrocities, not only are people scared literally for their own lives, but people can't process why this continues to happen to human beings, but also human beings that look like me. So that's exactly what you saw. It was just a lot of despair, anguish, pain, confusion, and a sheer determination to get back. People didn't know what they was going to get back to, but they wanted answers and they wanted a response. And part of the role of BBCC, and my role, was to actually be there to support, show face, to let society know, to let my community know specifically that we're here for the ups and the downs, and to actually help people talk through. Part of the work that we do and how this got done was us being able, all of us, being able to walk people through the process of politicizing their pain and their frustration. People have pain and frustration and don't know what to do about it. They don't have agency. And then we call them reckless because they don't know what to actually filter this pain and anguish through. So what we did was invite them to agency. Say, hey, there is actually a path where you can manifest your pain and your frustration to a co-governance situation where we can deliver something new to you and the remaining community in Brooklyn Center. So that's how it looked in the beginning.
Yeah, and Brian, just kind of a follow-up on that, and you've already touched on this, but what kind of steps did you take to engage the community in healing and active listening to kind of like arrive at this resolution?
Yeah. So there were some other things that was actually going on too at the time of this,
Yeah.
like during the protest, we had Operation Safety Net that was actually in Brooklyn Center, and the relations even between that law enforcement agency or operation, for lack of a better term, was not the best. And we can talk offline. We could talk about that. That's a whole nother story. But the first thing that I wanted to do is people start falling into cynicism. They start falling into hopelessness, isolation, guilt, shame, all these different things that keep you stagnant from actually activating yourself and leading in the community. So we had a barbershop forum. That's what we use our barbershops for. We use them to create community leadership, and we encourage protagonists in the community. We develop people. We give people agency. So we had a barbershop forum. And at that barbershop forum, because of organizing, everything is not planned, even Mr. Mayor showed up at our barbershop forum, which then humanizes government, where you stop being so cynical about government doesn't work, and we combat that with action. So if government don't work, the mayor's sitting right here. So we can't say that anymore. The other thing we wanted to do was use people's testimony with each other to unlock that feeling of isolation, or it's just happening to me. So people were able to relate around their testimonies and their stories. And then after that, we on-ramp them by saying, look, we need to start working on something new. We need you all's input. We want every last one of you all to show up in a bigger crowd and actually talk about your testimony, your story. And believe me, this is what the city council and the mayor needs to hear in order for us to pass this. So we just on-ramped everybody from the barbershop. The other part of that is that we just don't stop at our forums. We wanted to now start saturating the community with engagement, talking to people, walking people through exactly what happened, asking how they feel, accepting their suggestions and their feedback and whatever pushback they have. And then we also invited them to stand powerfully, tell their story, and actually have people committed to listening to that.
Thanks so much, Brian. It was just an absolute honor and delight to watch your organizing and all the amazing work you did in the community to pass the resolution, all the amazing work you continue to do around implementation, which we'll get to next. But before we get into implementation, Mayor Mike, I was curious to hear from you around how you built a coalition that could be a part of this effort that was bigger than you and the city council members, but really integrated, different organizations and organizers in Brooklyn Center.
It's an incredibly important question, Paige. This work wouldn't have gotten done without the incredible talents and commitment and efforts, energy from really amazing people and organizations that are represented in this forum here. Local Progress, ACLU of Minnesota, and national, as well as BVCC. And, we work together collaboratively. I think the real key ingredients were, we were all committed to seeing transformation happen because, we're all sick and tired of watching innocent young people be shot and killed at the hands of law enforcement across this country over and over again. And not only that, we were all committed to working together in a way that, really wasn't about any one individual, all of us willing to, check our egos at the door, if you will, and just work collaboratively. And anyone, who was able to take a particular task and do it and get it done, rose to the occasion and did that. And I think really putting our minds together and having this mind meld made all the difference in making sure that we were able to get this done. There's so many different aspects of getting a bill like this done, from writing it to getting the word out and introducing it, and making sure community can understand clearly what's in the bill and what the effect is going to be, as well as working to bat down people who are against it and want to see it fail. So all of this work took real incredible talent, and our community showed up as well. The community demanded in these listening sessions. They said, enough is enough. It's time. Right now is time for us to make this transformational leap. And we have this intentional process. And I just want to underscore what Brian said earlier about his work in engaging the community. I saw in these listening sessions people that I have never seen in any space that I've been in as mayor where there's been a public forum. And those people came in droves. And what Brian made me to understand was people who typically don't come into these spaces, it's not because they don't care. They do care. It's because they don't believe that showing up is going to make a difference. And they showed up because they believe that it was possible for us to make real change happen, that they had people involved in the process that helped them understand and believe that. People like Brian, and people that were going to hold our feet to the fire, if you will, to make sure that we had something that would transform public safety, that would actually help to solve these seemingly intractable problems that we have in our community. And during these public testimony, hours and hours of testimony over several weeks, it was very clear that our community of Brooklyn Center was ready for change. We heard out clearly in those sessions that people wanted unarmed traffic enforcement. They wanted mental health resources. And so we got to work in putting those provisions in the resolution as a result of hearing community very clearly say that that is what they needed. And we couldn't have done any of this work without the incredible partnership among all the people who are represented on this call today.
Yeah, absolutely. So final question to you, Mayor Mike, and to Brian is, how did you balance this need to take action, take it swiftly, and the need to also be in community and bring people along in the process? How do you balance that urgency with also the importance of community? Brian, you can go ahead. You can start.
I'm a grassroots organizer. There's no difference in the two. You can't take action without the community. Not with my theory of change. The path that I am firmly, concretely believe in is that for sustainable change, the people have to be part of that change every step of the way. We have to get to a point in our society that we quit even using words like independent political power, because the normality would be a co-governance relationship between government, legislator, decision maker, and community, where it's always a partnership, and that becomes a normality, everyday thing that we want to raise our kids seeing. My job is to bridge that gap. And if we're talking about public safety, it's the same ideology, it's the same formula. How do we have a vision or a Department of Public Safety that doesn't separate community from itself? So that means every part of public safety is prioritizing the community, and its orientation to the community is that you all are the ones who decide how we move this. If you have that kind of formula, then the community can never say this is not what we wanted. The other part of that is I never thought for a second that we would be even successful without the community. And if it was going to be successful, it would only be short term. Now you have grounded community members, residents of Brooklyn Center, that know they showed up and they showed out and they was delivered what they requested. So we don't have to talk about that no more. Now it's time to actually implement the Resolution Act with the very people who actually testified and who were part of the actual path. The only difference is they would invite others with them as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian. And the same question for you, Mayor Mike, if you had anything to add on to that.
Yes, so how do we balance the need for transformative change in the now and the need to engage community? We knew that we had to act very soon, very shortly after the killing of Dante Wright, because the community demanded it. And so we did that, but at the same time, we, as Brian said, knew that we needed to act in a way that was community driven, community informed, community centered. And so we didn't necessarily see a conflict in the two. We knew that we needed to have many listening sessions, give people a lot of opportunity to say what they wanted to see in a new public safety system. And we did that. We held a number of these listening sessions where we have folks from different backgrounds come and speak. And what was interesting is that people who politically you might think were on different ends of the political spectrum were in many instances saying the same thing, that these changes are common sense. Yes, police shouldn't be responding to mental health calls. They're not mental health professionals. In some of these listening sessions, we have people stand up who you may not think that they would support a resolution like this, who said, I support nothing that this mayor does ever, but this resolution is 95% good. And, in the same instance, I support this resolution. And so, listening to the community was really key, as Brian said earlier, to make sure that what we had was A, going to be long lasting, B, was going to actually do the work of solving the needs of the community. And so we centered the voices of people who have been most affected by the public safety system that we have now in place. And we center the voice of community overall, and we protected that space to make sure that the community had an opportunity to clearly articulate the direction that we needed to go. So the two were important, that we moved expeditiously and that we listened to community while we moved.
Thanks so much, Mayor Mike. We have an amazing question in the chat that I'd love to ask all three of our panelists. And it seems like major reform can only be achieved when horrific incidents of police brutality happen and the public gets extremely frustrated. How do we push for reform in more quote unquote regular times? Manira, I'd love to kind of start with you because you've been at the ACLU of Minnesota and have been working closely with Minneapolis following George Floyd's murder, the death of Dante Wright in Brooklyn Center. And so I'd love to start with you. How do you think we push for these type of transformational changes that doesn't always have to happen in the wake of a horrific incident?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question and incredibly pertinent. I would say the people have these like gigantic reactions to these pivotal moments like George Floyd, Dante Wright, because of just how shocking it is, right? And then once you look at really like police misconduct and police abuse and mistreatment and all the like smaller violations that don't necessarily lead to loss of life, you realize just how deep the problem is and how pervasive it all is. So one is just that like misconduct by the police is genuinely hidden. There's trouble getting into those files. The complaints are not transparent. So one, it's just these situations only rise to a national level because of how extreme they are, but to know that there's stuff happening every day. So having a more transparent process with police misconduct and letting people know actually how much is going wrong every single day, I think would just lift that veil for a lot of people. But yeah, I will let Brian and Mike jump in.
Yeah, Mayor Mike, do you want to go next?
Yes. Now, certainly, a moment like the killing of Dante Wright presents opportunity in a way that the community's attention and focus is on that act. But I would say don't wait for a Dante Wright to be murdered in your community before you act. We always have the opportunity to take action. If you wait, that's the loss of a very important life. Of course, what we're doing now is not justice. Justice is Dante Wright being here with us and being here with his child and with his mother and with his father. In terms of the ability for municipalities to take these type of action now and get something passed, I think there has never been a better time than right now. All across the country, all across the world, in fact, people are demanding, they've taken to the streets, and they have said, enough is enough. It's time for transformative change in public safety. And that's true really in every corner of the United States. So the time is right now to look at passing a resolution like the one we passed that's right for your community, is going to keep everybody in your community safe. These changes are already starting in a lot of other communities where they did not have a killing of a Dante Wright or a murder of a George Floyd. There are municipalities doing this now, so you can do it. All of us can take this action right now, and the community will rally behind those actions. Because everybody believes that we should not have police going to mental health calls. All of us can agree on that. And everybody believes that really it's time to move to a system that's going to have more different types of responses, and one that's going to keep our community safer than we ever have before. So to answer your question, we don't need to wait for a horrific incident of police brutality. We can act right now. You can act right now. So take that initiative and get the ball rolling, and you will identify the people in your community that will come out and support you, and then we're here to support you as well.
Thanks, Mayor Mike. And Brian, I don't know if you had something you wanted to add to that.
I just want to add, well, they kind of said it all, but I just want to add that, the country has been too complacent when it comes to public safety. My position, so this is in no way to defend the behaviors that we've seen and the dismissiveness and the devaluing of brown and Black bodies across the country. But I do want to point on one thing. For far too long, we have expected the police to do too many things that they're not capable of, nor do they have the capacity to do. So if it's nothing we have learned so far, is that looking at public safety with the new imagination about what's possible, how can we actually have a new thing? We started really realizing that, we had just been asking the law enforcement to do everything. Everything from somebody who may be struggling with mental health, from somebody who doesn't have an adequate place to stay overnight, to a domestic dispute, right? To a traffic stop. The spectrum of responsibilities that we have for one department, which is law enforcement and public safety, to able to hold, it's impossible. And so what we're merely doing, you don't need an atrocity to be committed for you to say, I want something different. When anything is spread too thin, and you have too many tasks, then there's not a very sustainable or impactful investment in any one of those things. Every department and every facet, every need of the community suffers. So basically, all we're doing, and you'll hear me say public safety more than I actually concentrate on law enforcement, because I want people to understand that our organizing around this, yes, we had some cold anger, but the more I started realizing what we was asking for, the anger kind of subsided where it became the logical thing to do. And the logical thing to do is let law enforcement enforce law. That doesn't mean somebody who's suffering with mental health issues need the law enforced on them. That means they need to be related to. They need somebody to actually dig in with them. The same thing with community violence. We're looking at a lot of gun violence. Everything is not a punitive response. Sometimes you have to be able to dig in with this young man or young woman and say, what's going on? So basically, it just makes sense. We want departments that answer all the different needs of the community. And when that starts to happen, you start seeing a community that's thriving.
Awesome. Thank you all. Kind of to wrap up our discussion on the how part of this, how did this resolution get passed? We have another question in the chat, and I encourage folks, if you do have questions, to put it in the chat, and we will try to get to them either by typing out answers or asking our panelists. This is for Mayor Mike, I believe. So how were / are current police department employees and or police unions involved in creating the resolution and moving forward towards implementation? I know there were some changes in the police department leadership following the killing of Dante Wright. So I don't know if you could speak a little bit about that.
We centered the voices of the employers of the police department when we were creating this resolution. As Brian said earlier, members of our community are the ones that are they are our bosses. They are the bosses of the police as well, right? And they are the ones that have the right to say, this is what we want you all to do. This is the vision for public safety that we want for our community. And then they charge us with doing that. And as policymakers, we articulate that and pass that as a law. And then our staff, which includes the staff that work in the police department, have to execute, and they have to carry that out. Or we have to get some new ones that have the skills and the abilities to carry that out. So we center the voices of community. We did provide the opportunity for the police officers, our employees, to look at the resolution and to give comments. And those comments were made available to the city council, to the policymakers, to understand what their thoughts were around the resolution. But we did not sit with our employees to write what the policy is going to be, because their role is to execute the policy, is to carry it out, right? And the city council did have an opportunity to hear what those employees that we pay, and they carry guns in our city, had to say about this new direction that we were going. But we did not center their voices because, again, none of them live here in Brooklyn Center. And the people who live in Brooklyn Center are the ones that have the responsibility to shape the future of Brooklyn Center. And we centered those voices in doing so. We did get law enforcement. We had a chief, I'm forgetting his name now, who did speak to the resolution, and supported the resolution and said, this is a common sense approach to public safety. As somebody who's got many years of law enforcement, a long law enforcement background, he supported this. And so what I would encourage anyone to do, if you're looking at passing a resolution like this, is to do what we did, which is center the voices of community and center the voices of the people who've been most impacted by the current policies in any other walk of life. If you were going to go and improve a system, you would find the people who have been most affected by that system. If you were going to improve a product, you find the people who use the product, people who have been impacted by that product, and then you would get their feedback. You would say, how is this working for you or not working for you? And then you would make the improvement. We took the similar approach to reforming public safety here in Brooklyn Center. And that's not to say that, that this is about anything other than centering the voices of the people, who have been most impacted by public safety, by the limited public safety options that we have in our city. And Brian alluded to this earlier. This was never about police. This is not police reform. This is public safety reform that we've passed here and that we're undertaking and implementing, which is much broader. And policing is a part of that, but it's not what this is about. This is about how do we keep all members of our community safe, and how do we do that from a public health perspective?
Thank you so much, Mayor Mike. I'm going to transition us now to, the fact that this effort isn't over, right? The passage of the resolution was groundbreaking, historical, but now we're at the point where it's all about implementation. The resolution doesn't matter unless it's implemented and takes effect in Brooklyn Center. So Manira, I'd love to raise this question for you because I know you've been involved in kind of developing out the implementation around this. What happens now? Nothing changes overnight. So what's next? What is Brooklyn Center working on developing now?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Paige. As we all know, resolutions can be, non-binding and kind of be more symbolic than they are actual. And that's really something we want to avoid with this resolution, which is why we have, mechanisms in there where the police or the city manager has to cooperate with the committees created here. But one of the provisions within the resolution is quite pivotal for the future of it, which is the implementation committee. The implementation committee will be made up of close to 11 members, mainly Brooklyn Center city residents. Again, those with experiences with law enforcement because they have that lived experience, but also a combination of other volunteers, professionals, locally and nationally. And what's really exciting about this implementation committee is that one, again, it centers community, but it also has other professionals in there that create these kind of subcommittees that focus on the main provisions of the bill. So there's a subcommittee devoted simply to creating the new department and seeing how best to incorporate like the fire and police and community response and traffic enforcement in a cohesive model. There's one simply devoted to budget, to seeing how these are going to be fiscally viable. So we really see this partnership between community residents and professionals and volunteers as kind of this testing grounds and really the site for actualizing the resolution. So we will have some kind of policy proposals within 6 months to the city council, but we'll also have just really this initial years-long effort to get a solid ground and to get a solid foundation where we can start to explore what are the best policy proposals, what are the best ideas that we can incorporate to make this resolution a reality. And really, this is a joint team effort. So we've seen in other cities like Berkeley or Oakland, when they're starting to think about these new innovative models for policing and really a new public health approach, they incorporate help from a number of resources. So we're going to to have facilitators that help the residents and the volunteers in this implementation committee walk through how to, start thinking about these ideas, how to frame these policies, and how to really research this. We'll have research consultants that'll help with like the tough data gathering and synthesizing of information. We'll have technical assistance from a lot of national groups, really helping to navigate the minutia and very complex details of something like how do you set up a new dispatch system that can channel these calls in the right way, and really navigating the complex bureaucracy of city and state government and county government. So the implementation committee serves a lot of functions. It keeps the work going by keeping Brooklyn Center residents engaged. It also serves as like a testing ground to start the data analysis, start the drafting of these policy proposals, and is really kind of creating the infrastructure to have a successful first year post-resolution passage, and really setting us up for success in the coming years.
Thanks so much, Manira. And Mayor Mike, I'd just love to hear from you of what you think the most important next steps are in implementation, and what's super critical to making this resolution as impactful as possible.
Well, I think Manira did a great job of giving an overview of the implementation process. What immediately for us is important is implementing our citation and summons policy, which is our citywide policy that's going to curtail arrests of our residents, for these low-level offenses. And then we're immediately next working on appointing the members of the implementation committee and getting that committee operational, and as well as bringing on board all of the resources that folks have reached out and said, we love to work with you, we love to help you implement this transformative model. So we're implementing our citation summons policy. We're appointing the members of the implementation committee soon, and then we're going to get the work rolling in those committees. And I'm hoping, just to say this again, I'm hoping that we can have the resolution fully implemented by April 2022, by the death anniversary of Dante Wright.
Thanks so much, Mayor Mike. And the final question I have is for Brian. How do you envision ensuring that you have the power and the momentum in the community to implement this resolution over the next few months, over the next year?
Yeah, well, part of that insurance has actually been on the team with these brilliant folks that we've been listening to. I'm just so thankful to be in this space and continue learning with them. But I just think I think community is just thirsty for an invitation. And I mean that in a very positive way. See, part of what goes on when Mr. Mayor actually referred to, like, hey, I haven't seen these people from the community in no space, and they came out in droves. We just simply respected them enough to invite them in. And so what happens now is that you actually use people who've had some experience at public life or public experience, and then you actually start building a relationship with them. And then because of that relationship and their own experience they had during this path, now you both invite others from their own private networks in to a residence of Brooklyn Center. So the ultimate goal for me is to have a multiracial democracy that is thriving. I just truly believe that none of us get to live a quality of life if there's a section of us that's being oppressed and disenfranchised. So it's always my goal, for one thing, to use something as huge and polarizing as this has been, and this being a model for the country, if I'm being totally honest. How do I actually use this opportunity now to galvanize the community, give them public experiences, and the whole time I'm teaching them about the power of the collective? How do you actually work together? And more importantly, how do you work with the same government that you were cynical about? The action is what actually combats the narrative and the thoughts that people think of themselves and of government. So I'm just really fired up at the opportunity to be able to do what I do. And then at the same time, learn from people like Manira. I could have never answered the way Manira just answered. Like, I'm going to be learning. I'm going to be learning from Mr. Mayor, you, Ari, I mean, the whole crew. Jilly, I've learned so much from you all. But when it comes to the people, it's just a grind. It's very easy when you talk about what needs to be done. We just got to go do it. And that's inviting people in, keeping them energized, and the whole process being very transparent to them. And my job is going to be like with a amplifier, like a megaphone, saying, this is what we're about to go do. Do you want to come in every step of the way? And we should be fine when it comes to community engagement and participation.
Thank you so much, Brian. I just, we're at the point of closing comments, so I'm going to give the mic over to all of you to just say a final comment on the resolution, what you're excited for, anything you haven't been able to mention yet during this town hall. And I'd love to start with Manira.
I'm just really excited about getting the work of the implementation committee going and seeing, like, all the hurdles I'm sure we'll face in the implementation part of this, but also, the breakthroughs that we'll make. And I'm just genuinely happy that there was the political will to do this, because I think we've known about these solutions for a long time, right? No one is like surprised that a civilian traffic enforcement is better than someone with a gun showing up to a minor offense. These are things that have been studied for a long time, and we kind of know what the solutions are. But it took the killing of Dante Wright, unfortunately, and a mayor who had the political will to start implementing this and take action and take steps, even if it was going to, upset the police unions and all that stuff. But I think I'm also really grateful that it was in, I think it's really telling that it was in Brooklyn Center. For those who don't know, Brooklyn Center, I think, is a really special city in Minneapolis and Minnesota. It's incredibly diverse. It's got the largest Black population. And it's also been, a site of gentrification where a lot of Black and brown people from North Minneapolis will move and be pushed up northwards towards the suburbs, towards Brooklyn Center. So it's the site of like evolving politics and evolving demographics. And I feel like if we can have a success with police reform and public safety in this city, I think we can really make a strong case for transporting this to the country at large, and really make a breakthrough with these issues. So yeah, those are all the things I'm excited about.
Thanks so much, Manira. Brian, any final remarks?
Kobe Heisler and Dante Wright, we have to make sure that every time their names are spoke, it's spoken in the same sentence with the word transformational. And I just want everybody on this call with us tonight to be grounded in the fact that as horrible as the experiences we've had in this state, it is mandatory that something great come from it. And I think this resolution and the way we implement this and how this now begins to be a model for the rest of the state, immediately for Minneapolis. It's high stakes, but we embrace the process. And I thank God for the opportunity to be a part of it. I'll leave that right there.
Thanks so much, Brian. And Mayor Mike, to close us out, final remarks.
Well, this has really been, I think, a great honor to work on this resolution and to see it passed by the courageous members of the Brooklyn Center City Council and all the people who worked on helping to make sure that this resolution passed. We, again, responded to our community saying enough is enough. It's time for us to transform. It's time for us to make change happen that's going to keep all of us safe. Dr. King said, this is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. That's why we responded to the community. We said, we're not going to do piecemeal. We're not going to take the tranquilizing drug. People said, just wait. Why don't you wait till everything blows over? We said, no, we are going to act, and we're going to act boldly. We're going to act to make sure that we're keeping every member of our community safe. And what the feeling that I got in passing this resolution is what Sam Cooke sang. He said, it's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. And a change came. And that change has been a long time coming. We know that history tells us that the root causes of violence in our community, in terms of police brutality and community violence, they're much connected. We know that there's a systemic institutional racial exclusion that has intentionally left out Black people through federal, state, and local policies, through housing policies, through education and jobs policies that have created these deep, deep inequities in all of our states and throughout this country. Just last year, Citigroup issued this report that showed that the US lost $16 trillion because these changes have not been made. The US lost 16 trillion with a T, trillion dollars due to racism. It's time for change. And we're moving. All across this country, we're moving. And we're making change happen. Transformative change, not gradual change. So I'm really calling on all of you, especially the elected officials, the community members. The community members, you can make the change happen. You can drive the change for your city, for your town, and for your state. And for the elected officials, you have the power to make change happen. You have the power to author a resolution that's going to see, why not keep everybody in our community safe? Why not? That is our number one responsibility. You have the power to do it. So if you're on this webinar, if you're listening, take the action tomorrow. Take up the mantle and ask all of us on this call to assist you in making it happen. And you'll see that miracles can happen. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. Mayor Mike, you really summed up my call to action. You know, police have an enormous outsized role in this country. They have amassed enormous amounts of power, resources, and they play an outsized role in our communities. And the safest communities are the ones with the most resources, not the most police. So we have a great task in front of us, but there is great hope, as I hope you all heard on this call. There is potential. There is reason to be optimistic. You know, to the organizers, advocates, and activists who joined us today, we really hope the story of what happened in Brooklyn Center gives you inspiration and a roadmap to transform public safety in your own community. We urge you to get in touch with us at the ACLU. My information is up here if you want to think through what's possible in your community. And to the local elected officials joining us, get in touch with us, get in touch with Local Progress and your local ACLU chapters. We have affiliates in every state, as well as DC and Puerto Rico. And with that, we are going to close out. Thank you so very much to our amazing speakers today. Brian, Manira, and Mayor Mike, I am constantly in awe of you. Everyone in Brooklyn Center who made this possible, the community, and all of you on this call who are fighting for a transformative vision of keeping each other safe. Thank you all so much and have a great rest of your night and week.